I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at two pink lines that would change everything. My hands trembled as I held the test, knowing the man I loved had vanished without a trace, leaving me pregnant and alone. I had no idea this moment would lead to a decade of lies that would nearly destroy the most beautiful love story I never deserved. My name is Sarah. I'm 34, a primary school teacher in Norwich, England, and for 10 years I've been married to the most patient, gentle soul you could imagine. Michael is an engineer who speaks with his actions rather than words, a man who listens with his whole heart and trusts completely. Everyone says he's the quiet type, and they're right. But what they don't know is that I built our entire marriage on a lie that was about to explode. Before Michael, there was someone else. His name was Jake, and he was everything my careful, predictable life wasn't. We met in my final year at university, and he had this infectious laugh that could fill a room and wild dreams that made my heart race. Jake wanted to conquer the world, start his own company, travel everywhere, live without boundaries. He made me feel alive in ways I'd never experienced. We were together for 2 years, planning to move to Manchester and build this incredible life together. But my family despised him. His parents couldn't stand me either. Different backgrounds, different dreams, different everything. The pressure mounted from all sides, and slowly, Jake began pulling away. Then one morning he was simply gone. No goodbye, no explanation, no forwarding address. His phone was disconnected. His emails bounced back, and I was left wondering if our entire relationship had been a mirage. 3 weeks after Jake disappeared into thin air, I discovered I was carrying his child. That bathroom floor became my breaking point. My parents would never accept a baby from the man they'd driven away, and I had no way to find Jake even if I wanted to. So I made the choice that would haunt me for the next decade. I decided to stay silent. That's when Michael walked into my life like a gentle storm. We met at a family friend's dinner party, and he was Jake's complete opposite. Steady where Jake was chaotic, thoughtful where Jake was impulsive, reliable where Jake was unpredictable. I didn't love Michael then, but when he started bringing me small flowers and asking about my day, he felt like safety incarnate. When Michael proposed, I said yes not because my heart sang, but because I thought maybe love didn't always have to be fireworks. Maybe it could be kindness, consistency, peace. We married quickly, and I told Michael the baby was his. He believed me without question, and when little Oliver was born, Michael held him like he'd been waiting his entire life for that moment. "He's perfect," Michael whispered, tears streaming down his face. "He's ours." I wanted to scream the truth right then, but instead I watched this incredible man pour his heart into loving a child that wasn't biologically his. Every midnight feeding, every diaper change, every lullaby sung in the darkness, Michael gave everything to Oliver, while I carried my secret like a stone in my chest. As Oliver grew, I saw Jake everywhere in him. The dark hair that curled just so, the determined chin, that mischievous smile when he got his way. Michael never noticed, always saying Oliver looked just like me. And maybe he did a little, but I knew the truth that lived behind those familiar features. We became the perfect family on paper. Sunday park visits, beach vacations, birthday parties with homemade cake and too many balloons. Michael never questioned anything, never doubted, never wavered in his devotion to us both. He was the husband I didn't deserve and the father Oliver needed, even as guilt ate away at my soul every single day. Then came the Saturday that changed everything forever. Oliver was 9, playing in a school football match with Michael and me cheering from the sidelines. He was running toward the goal when suddenly, without warning, he collapsed. Just dropped to the ground and went completely still. The coach sprinted over. I screamed until my throat was raw, and Michael scooped Oliver up while we waited for the ambulance that seemed to take forever to arrive. At the hospital, the doctors said Oliver needed blood immediately. Michael volunteered without hesitation, rolling up his sleeve before they'd even finished asking. But then the doctor returned with confusion, written all over his face. "Are you certain you're the biological father?" he asked quietly. The world stopped spinning. Michael stared at the doctor while I felt every drop of blood drain from my face. The doctor explained that their blood types made it medically impossible for Michael to be Oliver's father. Michael didn't speak, didn't move, just sat in that plastic chair staring at the floor, like he could see his whole world crumbling. That night, after Oliver was stable, I told Michael everything. About Jake, about the pregnancy, about every lie I'd built our life on. I cried until I had nothing left while Michael sat in absolute silence. When I finished, he stood up without a word and walked into Oliver's hospital room. I spent the night alone in that sterile hallway, wondering if I'd just destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to any of us. For days, Michael barely spoke to me. He focused entirely on Oliver's recovery, while I lived in the shadow of my own shame. But he didn't leave. Even after everything, he stayed. A few days after we brought Oliver home, the school called. Oliver had gotten into a fight, which shocked us because he'd never shown aggression before. When Michael asked why, Oliver's answer shattered my heart into pieces. "Another boy told everyone you're not my real dad," Oliver said, his voice small and hurt. I looked at Michael, expecting anger, but instead saw only calm determination. He pulled Oliver into his arms and said with absolute certainty, "That's not true, son. I'm your dad in every way that matters. I'm your dad because I choose to be every single day." That night, I stepped outside for air and felt the weight of 10 years pressing down on my chest. As I turned to go back inside, a car pulled up to our house. My legs nearly gave out when I saw who stepped out. Jake. Older, more tired, but unmistakably him. He walked toward me with purpose and said without preamble, "He's mine, isn't he?" I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't respond. My silence was answer enough. "I want to see him," Jake continued. "I want to know my son." It wasn't a request. It was a demand. And suddenly, the secret I'd carried alone for so long belonged to everyone, threatening to tear apart the family we'd built from love and lies. Behind me, the front door opened. Michael stood there holding his coffee mug, taking in the scene instantly. Jake looked directly at him and said, "We need to talk." Michael nodded once and stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, Jake sat on the edge of our sofa while Michael stood by the window like a sentinel. I pressed myself against the kitchen doorway, feeling like an intruder in my own life. "I have a right to see him," Jake said. "You can hate me, call me whatever you want, but I won't walk away again." Michael's voice was steady but cold. "You have no idea who that boy is. You weren't there for his first steps, his nightmares, his scraped knees. You didn't teach him to ride a bike or help with homework or hold him when he was scared." Jake's jaw tightened. "That's not my fault. I didn't know." "You left," I whispered, finding my voice at last. "You disappeared when I needed you most. I was pregnant and you were gone without a trace." "I would have come back if I'd known," Jake insisted. "I wasn't ready then, but I am now." Michael gave a hollow laugh. "Ready now? How convenient. But we've already done the hard work. You don't get to waltz in and play hero." Jake stood up, his patience gone. "Then let's do this properly. DNA, test, legal custody arrangement. I'll take it to court if necessary." The word court hit me like a physical blow. I pictured Oliver caught between lawyers and legal documents, his childhood becoming a battleground. "Is that what you want?" Michael asked me quietly. "To turn Oliver into a legal case?" "No," I said quickly. "I don't want that." "Then give me what I'm asking for," Jake said simply. The next few days blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and lost appetite. We consulted a family lawyer who confirmed our worst fears. We couldn't prevent Jake from requesting a DNA test. And if he proved paternity, he could petition for visitation or even joint custody. Michael retreated into himself, building walls around his heart that I couldn't breach. One night, I gathered the courage to ask, "Do you still love me?" He looked at me for what felt like an eternity. "I love Oliver," he said finally. Right now, that's what matters. The DNA test confirmed what we all knew. Jake was Oliver's biological father. A fact that somehow hurt more in black and white than it had in my guilty heart. Jake requested visitation rights, and despite the lawyer's efforts, we had no grounds to deny him. Every other Saturday, Jake would pick up Oliver, who went along with it because I asked him to. When Oliver came back from their first visit, he seemed fine enough. "We went to the zoo," he said. He bought me ice cream, but something fundamental was shifting in our carefully balanced world. Then came the question that nearly broke Michael completely.